recorded. I'm just going to start today with our vision for our Kāhui, which is Kia tu tangata o te Hiku o te ika, let the people of te Hiku o te ika stand strong. So this is the second in our taster sessions for the Assessment for Learning PD that we're running. Eventually, we're going to have a really good bank of different strategies that you can use aligned to the 5 different areas of assessment for learning. So why is it not clicking? There we go. So the outline for today, the name of today's session is called There's No I in Team. And we're going to talk about what the importance of why it's so important to use group work for assessment for learning for student accelerating student progress. We're going to go over one simple strategy. We're going to talk about what enables that strategy and some of the barriers to it. And then if you would like to, we can stay on for any questions to actually implement it into your existing plans and maybe to have a bit of practice. So as you guys all saw recently, we are looking at assessment for learning through the Dylan, William and Paul Black framework, which has 5 aspects. And the one that we're really honing in on with this strategy today is the activating students as learning resources for one another. But I've actually circled the other 4 as well, because this strategy does cover all 5 areas, but particularly the activating students one. So I've got up here some specific iwi aspirations that this strategy applies to, and that's the Tuakana-Tainer model of learning. It allows everyone's voices to be heard, and it makes the learning environment engaging, like we talked about the other day, with not having hands up, where everyone's an active participant in the learning. And it also aligns with neuroscience and brain development in the facet of retrieval practice, because it's getting students to recall learning they've already done and apply it in different contexts. So again, we're focusing on the achievement challenge of Tū Tangata Marama, what makes me know, within our Kāhui achievement challenges, particularly those aspects I've got listed there that come under Tū Tangata Marama. So why do we want students to use each other as resources? So one of the things that's really important here is that when we build strong routines where students do support each other in a structured manner, what happens is the quality and the frequency of the interactions you have in a lesson increase significantly. And the more interactions and the quality of those interactions, the more likely you are to improve student outcomes, and they're actually going to walk away having done the learning that you were hoping that they would. So when students have to retrieve knowledge and learning and actually use it and apply it rather than just doing the relearning, and when you've got more of them involved in doing that, memory is actually strengthened by 30 to 50%. And essentially, learning is basically strengthening memory. So if something's been learned, it means that they can use it in lots of different ways and they've actually remembered it. So learning isn't just the interaction you have initially where you learn new information. You don't learn something until you've pulled it out several times for it to cement those neural pathways. So students as resources for each other means that we can step back as being in control of every single interaction that happens in the class, and we can actually support our students to step up into that Tuakana-Tainer role. So a lot of text on this slide, but I wanted to make sure there was a really clear success criteria. So the strategy that we're using is a really well-used strategy for anyone who does assessment for learning, and anyone who's done anything around cognitive science, and it's called Think It, Say It, Teach It. So the reason this is a good strategy is students consolidate their learning by retrieval. They find out what they know and what their gaps are, and they can actually help to support each other to fill those gaps by interacting with other students, because they interact with more than one student through the process. So the first thing that you have to do is identify the concept that you want students to summarize, recall, or retrieve, and make sure that your students are aware of this. Once you've done this strategy with students quite a few times, like any strategy that we do, you can just say to them, we're doing Think It, Say It, Teach It, and they'll know what's about to come. So you just make sure that they're clear and they understand, you check for understanding of what you're testing in their memory. So this wouldn't be for teaching new information. This is to either recall something you've literally just taught them, or it could be something you did the day before, or it could be something last week or a few weeks ago or last year. So in pairs, you give students thinking time to retrieve whatever it is that you're hoping that they're going to pull out. and then be really specific within the pairs that they're in. And that needs to be a routine that's already set up, whether A or B is going to go first. So you literally give them the prompt, you tell them how much time they've got to think, and then say, well, A's are going to go first, give them an amount of time that they've got, and then they swap and the other partner goes. So at this point, you might want to give your students a summary of the facts you were hoping they were going to retrieve, but you don't have to, because then they can do it as a bit of a self-assessment to go, oh yeah, I didn't remember that, or yes, I did that. And then that also prompts them to recall it and use it for the next step. So the teach it part can be done in several different ways. So I've just listed 4 ways here, but there are other ways you can do it too. The most commonly used one is where they just swap with another pair and change partners, and they then teach what they've learned from the other person combined with their own learning and maybe your summary, and they teach it to the new partner. What I quite like to do is before they do the teach it step, I get them either on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper or in their book to create a visual representation of the knowledge they've retrieved and maybe got from their partner or the board, and then use that to teach with someone else. So that also brings in something called dual coding or binary coding, which was where a pictorial representation is really strong for retrieval and for learning. So are words, but when you put them together, it's doubly powerful. So the next way that you can use it is actually students go and teach it to a younger student. And if you wanted to make this a routine in your class, you could set up a time each week where you do some Kāhui time where the older students go and teach something to the younger students. Another way they can do the teach part is actually to go home and teach it to whānau, and that's quite a nice way to set up the whānau relationships. If you just send them a quick email and say, your child's going to come home and teach you something tonight, so can you make sure you ask them? So I quite like this whakatauki for the concept of tuakana teina. Mā te tuakana ka tōtika te teina, mā te teina ka tōtika te tuakana. From the older, the younger learns how to do it. From the younger, the older learns how to be tolerant. Everyone has responsibilities, both the old and the young. And I think this represents really well that aspect of assessment for learning of students using each other as resources. So sometimes you're going to be the teacher, sometimes you're going to be the learner. You're always going to have a responsibility to the people around you in your pair or your group or the whole class. So the enablers for this, like any strategy that we ever do or anything in class, the more you pre-plan, the better. So if you actually think about what you're going to prompt the students with and the way you're going to say it, that makes quite a big difference. The first few times that you do this new strategy, like anything, do it with a familiar context first. So the cognitive load is taken away from the context or content and it's all on the strategy itself until that becomes more habitual. And then always model it first with students you know are quite confident and will probably pick it up quite quickly. And like the Anita Archer, I do, we do, you do, you model it first, then they have a go together in a low stakes context, and then they go and do it themselves with a more high stakes content or context. Always make sure you give students enough thinking time, because that's often something we don't do enough of, and then they actually haven't got the time to pull out what they need to themselves. Pre-plan the groups that you're in. So like with my class at the moment, they know that they're in a group of 4 and they know who their pairs are in that group of 4, and they know they're going to be in that group for 4 weeks of this term. And so there's no arguments, they just know who that's working with. After 4 weeks it will change, and then at the last couple of weeks of term I usually give them a bit of a choice. Set the students up for success. Don't ask them to retrieve something they actually don't know. It's especially when you first start using this strategy, if students aren't used to talking to each other in their pairs or in groups, then make sure that it is something they'll be successful with. And also it's really good to communicate about this strategy with whānau, like any learning in class, because they're more likely to talk about it with their students when they get home. Barriers, giving up after the first try. So if you went into your class tomorrow and thought, let's give this a go, and it went horribly wrong, if you give up, it's never going to work. You need to practice it and work out what goes wrong, what do you need to put in place. And also another enabler is to tell the kids, if you haven't done this before, this is a new strategy I've just learned about. I've heard it's really good for learning. We're probably not going to be that great at it when we first do it, but let's give it a go and we'll keep practicing it and see if it gets better. And I've just put there the reverse of any of the enablers will be a barrier. So I've got a few examples here, and I'll just go through them quickly just to give you an idea of what it can look like and sound like. So I've chosen a really familiar context of something to do with routines. So the bus and pickup lines after school. When you get new students in school, they often need teaching those things. I've just got a new student in my class today who needed to learn this stuff. So you might say, for example, we're learning a new strategy called Think It, Say It, Teach It, and we're going to use some easy themes to learn it. I want you to imagine you have to teach a new student about how we line up for buses or pick up after school. With your partner, I'll give you 10 seconds thinking time to think about how you would teach the new student. Then you'll have 15 seconds each to share. Then go with another partner and teach the key points to each other. I'm going to model this with Sasha first. And so I would go through what that would look like with her. I won't do it for this context, but we'll do it with another one in a minute. So some other ideas of what you could do for familiar contexts are there. Today I was going through procedural writing with my students, and I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I showed them that Danny from Awanui, the principal there, showed us at a PLD the other day, the peanut butter and jelly making a sandwich where the students have to write the instructions and they're really unclear. So we watched that, and then I got my students to write instructions for other things like how to do a push-up, how to play Red River, how to use flashcards, how to read a book, and they had a lot of fun doing that. And it gives them the idea of, like, if you're teaching something to someone else, you need to be really detailed. So this is another example for maybe recalling Waitangi Day facts, and I've said this probably would be aimed at phase 2 or 3. So you're going to teach a teina in Rumarua what you know about Waitangi Day. Think about the 5 W's and H. With your partner, you'll have 20 seconds thinking time, 20 seconds to share, and then you're going to draw a picture to teach what you've recalled to a student in Rumarua. And so there's the process that you would go through, and I would actually, I was going to get you guys to do this actually. So I'm going to give you 20 seconds of thinking time, and then I'll stop the video and we're going to come back and pretend we're a pair to share the information. So I might actually just pause the video now, if I can remember how to do that. So good job, guys, saying it, thinking it, saying it, and teaching it. So I've just showed a summary here of if I've taught this, what I might have taught to the students that I'm hoping that they recall. And what we noticed, just for the benefit of the recording, was that everyone had different information, everyone drew different pictures. And so the more that we can get a number of different students to interact in a planned, structured way, the more information and variety they're going to get, repeating the same information, but in different ways, which helps to cement those pathways in their brain. So another example, a couple of examples I've got here. One is for health and PE, hauora. Another one for forces in the physical world. So I've tried to give examples that you could use for each of the phases. So I know that a couple of the schools I'm working with at the moment, that hauora is a big focus, and Te Wharetapawha. And my daughter's class actually at the moment are looking at tahatinana, and they're looking at how there's 2 elements to their well-being that they've learned about, and this would be a really good way for them to recall what they've been learning about physical movement and nutrition. And another good one where a diagram probably would be able to be used. So the physical world, so science, for pūtaiao, I've spelt that wrong, I've just noticed, I've got an A missing, I'll correct that. So students would have been having a play around with the motion of objects in the previous term, and for the younger students, often in new entrant and year 1 classes, you get new students coming in all the time, so it'd be a good opportunity for that tuakana taina relationship where the older students could teach the new students what they'd learned through this activity as well. So we're going to do a quick summary now using this strategy about what you have taken away so far about how this works. So the what, why, and how of Think It, Say It, Teach It. So I'm going to give you 20 seconds to think, and then 30 seconds each to share, and then create a visual about the what, why, and how that you could teach someone else at your school who's not here today. So I'm going to time 20 seconds. You're going to have a think about what have you heard, what have you taken away about anything we've talked about today to do with think it, say it, teach it. We've just finished now, and we're just going to take some questions if anyone's got any, but I will be sharing these slides, and if you have any other questions, then please let me know.